Chips.
Hey everyone, here's Bogdan for Ship Studios. We're back with another tutorial series about water simulation in Blender 3.0. This one is going to be a split since there was way too much info to sum up into just one video. So we hope you enjoy it and let's get cracking. First, let me activate the screencast key so that you can actually see what I'm doing right here. Then we can delete the default cube since we won't be using it. And then the next step, what I usually like to do is to make a separate collection for the camera and lights. I just like to work on layers. I'm used to that style, so I actually recommend using it. You can press here to open up the widgets, and you can press on the small arrows that you won't be able to select camera and lights. Now we go back to the main and we can create Mesh the monkey. So here is Suzanne. She's like Blender's main mascot. And we'll be using her as a container for the water simulation. And what I always like to do is to give it like a subdivision surface modifier. I'll actually ramp that up to about 5 for the render. And you can actually take it up in the viewport to 5 as well, just to take a look. You can shade it smooth so that looks way better. But we won't be actually working on level 5 for the viewport. I like to scale this up. We have to make it pretty large, so about 31 meters for the x-axis. That's perfect. Then we apply the scale, and now I'll hide Suzanne. Then I like to move a bit around the camera and the lights, since right now they're actually inside the mesh that we just scaled up. So I like to give a head start to the positioning of the camera and the light. Go in the X-ray mode, and then we can play around with the position. You don't have to exactly follow me around, but I usually like to take up an angle for the camera so that I make the composition a bit more interesting, let's say. So I'll press right here from the view, camera to view, and right now when you're moving around the viewport, camera is actually following your view. So you can place it much easier like this. And angle just right. Then you have to untoggle it. If not, the camera is just gonna follow you around and it's gonna get messy. As for the light, don't really bother right now. We have a lot of work to do on the water simulation first. Now I deselected the camera and lights, so you should probably do it too. I've created a cube, and this cube I'm gonna scale it up. So this is actually going to be the area that the water simulation is gonna be working in. So Suzanne is going to be the container, but this cube is going to be the base for the water simulation. I applied the scale also. Then I'll call it domain. And then I'd also like to create an UV sphere. So the sphere will be like the base flow of the water. And I'd like it to be inside Suzanne. To have to do a little bit of work for that one. I place it right here. It should be good for now. I also press Shade Smooth just because I like it more. Yes. So this is the basic setup. Now what we'd like to do is that water will be flowing from the sphere into Suzanne, and we'll be actually making Suzanne look like glass so that you can see inside it. So we go to main, physics, fluid, and we set the cube to domain, and we took it from gas to liquid. Leave that as it is for now. would like to go back to Suzanne and the sphere. So the sphere will be called the source, and Suzanne is going to be actually the effector for the fluid. It's the object that the water is going to be hitting and then staying inside the monkey shape of Suzanne. So we want to set a sampling substep to about 12 and then a surface thickness about 0.2. Yeah, that should be all right. And then we set up the source as well as the flow. And that's where the water will be coming from. And we set it up as liquid. Then we also can set it for inflow and sampling substeps to about 12. Then we can actually go back to the domain and we can take up the resolution to about 100. This is gonna be it for now, but we'll be changing that later for a better result. You can leave those as they are, and then what we'd like to work on is the frame rate. So what you like to actually know before you do an animation is what frame rate you should use. I'll be using 30 frames per second, and I want 5 seconds of animation, so that's gonna sum up to about 150 frames. So that's about it from 1 to 150 for the frames, and set it up to all, and you can set it as resumable, but that might get buggy sometimes, so that depends on your system, I guess. Now what I'd also like to do is to set up for Suzanne a little bit of thickness. But first, let me just bake simulation how that looks. Okay, here we are, and nothing happens, right? Let's press free all, and then nothing happens because we actually can't put anything inside this object because of the normals of Suzanne. We got an object inside of Suzanne, and the normals, we can actually check them, the face orientation right here. And right now what we'd like to do is to flip the normals so that we can let particles flow inside of the shape. So let's get to front view, and then I'll press Ctrl Shift N after going into edit mode. And then we want to press inside. So right now we are actually able to simulate something inside of the body of Suzanne's mesh. So let's get back to it. And then we can toggle that off, and we can go to X-ray mode again and try to bake again for a simulation. Let's see how that turns out. And it works ish. The main problem that we have right now is that particles are falling off out of Suzanne, and even though they are flowing and some of them are stopping inside, the problem is that we don't have enough thickness for the mesh. So we can always ramp it up from here, but what I would like to do is to actually go and add a solidify modifier to Suzanne. But first, let's free the simulation, and then we can go back to Suzanne and set up from a modifier the solidify, and you don't have to go overly extra. You can just give it value of about maybe 0.6, maybe even lower than that. Okay, I'll settle for that. It still looks good. Just take care that the mesh won't be looking weird when you use the thickness. Too much will be making your mesh look bulky. Then you can take the solidify modifier and place it on top. And right now the subdivision is doing most of our work. That looks neat. Let's take this back to 1 for now. And right now, some of the particles are going to stay inside, but that might just not be enough for now. Let's make a small test. So we go back to the baking and let's bake again, see if there's a difference. Okay, yep, that's a pretty huge difference. Right now, all of the particles look like they're staying inside and you can actually see the thickness of the mesh. But if you actually take a really close look, not all of the particles are staying inside. Some of them are like going on the margin, and right now we have just the base mesh particles. We can actually add more to that. So let's see how we can solve these out. First of all, let's check the mesh. Okay, that looks good. And we press free all, and then we can ramp up the samples to about 130 to see how that would look. Okay, and we're back. Right now, when we went up a bit with the samples, you can see that for the most part, the particles are staying inside and everything is going smoothly. Just very few of them are going a little bit awkward. But it actually looks pretty decent for this stage. We can free up again. So we can actually go a little bit extra for the water simulation. Let's check up the mesh and then we'd like to get some foam and actually maybe get some bubbles in. The spray is kinda alright, but it's sometimes buggy, so I'll not do that for now. You can actually check it, but you might be getting some render issues, so I'd like to avoid it. Bake. And then it looks like this. Oh, what's happening? Mesh is getting out, right? Like those are the really small particles that we've seen earlier, and they were actually not so visible because they were really small, but now that we have mesh attached to them, you can actually see where the problem lies. Like there's still some particles slipping through this bottom part of Zen. So what can we do about it? Well, there is actually a solution into the particle system, and you can set up first, just move around and free everything up, and we can go back to the top and we can add fractional obstacles. And I'll actually set this up to about 0.5, and the obstacle distance you can actually leave it as it is. And what I also like to do is to take the time steps maximum that we're using up to 12 and the minimum about 8. This will actually give a much longer render, but will actually improve the quality of each sub-step that it's doing. So let's bake again. Take a look. All right, so here we are. And guess what? We don't have any more, well, actually we do have some small issues, but those particles aren't actually going out of the mesh. They are stopping right in between. There's still some small improvements that we could make, but this could actually be just good enough for this tutorial. You can take up the samples even higher, but be careful that render times will be getting much longer. Simulations are really time consuming and the resources consuming. This looks actually pretty dope. So this is it for today. Gonna conclude the first part of the tutorial series. And don't worry, we're actually gonna be posting it tomorrow, the second part, and we'll be going in depth about rendering, lighting, environment, and well, the final render and maybe some small tweaks. So see you later. Bye.